What is up, everybody? Escape211 here. Happy New Year to you all if you didn't hear it from me already. And today we are going to be covering the rest of the PvE stuff because the event is almost closing for those that are getting it for A/B testing on this first shot. So we only have about a day left as it shows over here. So I wanted to just kind of reassess all of it. As you can see, I actually got all the way to the end. I didn't play the last level. That's the only one I haven't been able to because I don't really have the A coins to buy it. And I did this all free actually. So going through and doing this as a new player, it is reasonable in the almost 2 weeks time. They give you like 10, maybe 11 days roughly to do this. So, you know, you have a good chunk of time to do it, I think, to reasonably get through all this other stuff. So I wanted to just talk about each of the levels that I haven't talked about yet in my experience with them so far, just because when I first started, these first two levels are really easy, but it definitely ramps up as you go along, and I appreciated that. So I wanted to talk about that and then an overall general assessment of this whole thing. So let's talk about each of these levels first, okay? So the first one, level 3 that we have that was next would be the Gauss Rifle 6. Now this was kind of annoying because you have to spend 8 coins for it, but because you can now get the Cryo Jav 6 so easily, you're kind of offset by those two. So, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. But getting this one was a bit of a pain, but the level itself was only a little bit harder than 1 or 2. Maybe that's what you expect just because you're kind of ramping it up a little bit. But there was the introduction of the cheetahs in this with the tricky style mechs. And cheetahs themselves usually aren't a huge pain, but when you have so many cheetahs with so many mines, yeah, it's going to be a pain to get around. So this is where you start to see where like this mech can really be effective in this mode, just as you get waves of enemies and stuff like that. So an interesting one, not super difficult though. When we get to the next one, level 4, the requirements are easy because shotgun 4s you already get easily on the second tier, but this level is much harder. It's a smaller level. They're using one of the 2v2 maps, of course, and then because you only have these shotgun 4s, you can only engage stuff close, and as you get waves of enemies and other stuff that creep up on you, you know, you can get swarmed pretty easily. Even though you have shotguns, you can get swarmed pretty well. This one did take me a few tries to do. So, you know, this is where it starts to ramp up a little bit and you'll feel more of the pain or the difficulty of dealing with enemies. So it definitely gets trickier here. For this one, we are using the Cryo Jav 6, all right? So like I was saying before, this is a weapon that you can now reasonably get. Because they've changed the referral system, you really only need to get 1 referral, and then after they get to Division 10, which takes like less than an hour, I would say, you can get this weapon. So it's actually very easy to get for free, and then you don't have to spend your money here. You can spend it on the Gauss. So, you know, very reasonable for free-to-play players to get. Obviously, those who have an account won't really affect us much. But for this mode, it was an interesting one. You know, it was Agora again, so you had the space kind of to play with. But what they played with more is where enemies spawn. Like for this spot that I was in, enemies spawned closer to my position before when I was in a different spot. So when I had to play it another time, I had to get in a new spot for when this new wave came. So it was, you know, they played more with spawn locations, which made it trickier to position yourself. This one, you have a mixed build, the Rocket Mortar 8 and the Shotgun 4. The Rocket Mortar 8 is a pain to get here for the A coins, of course, and it also performs really poorly just because you're not using implants to benefit from it. It's not the worst weapon to get because some people will run 8, 12 builds later on, but here it isn't really that useful, and it makes some of these spots really just boring to play. But there are other areas where it's a lot tougher because, again, you have this mixed build, and they play with different elements in the game. Now, it shows you instances where, like, when you kill a certain weapon, other enemies will spawn, or when you go in a certain position, there are other times that, you know, these cheetah mechs will spawn, and it makes this very tricky because you have to move into certain positions, or at least you want to be able to deal with other enemies, and then you have these cheetah mines that kind of hit mid-range, and this build is good at long and short range, so the mid-range is where it suffers, and the cheetahs will try to get you in that kind of space. So they make it very tricky, and I guess that's the whole point of the mech, but you know, it's an interesting one to play. It takes a few tries, but it was still a pretty good experience overall. Just a pain, of course, to get the rocket mortars to make this happen for a new player. All right, now this one was, of course, the trickiest that I experienced as the second last level. Probably because with this one, you have your first 8 energy weapon that is dual, and unless you upgrade to rank 4 with Ares, you're not going to be able to dual wield it. And that's just the nature of how this works, and that's okay, but it does mean that you are left with a little bit less firepower, and it's tricky in some battles where you know, will be down waiting for a reload. But the Pulse Cannon has a decent reload, decent clip, so it's definitely doable without it. This does have some new enemies that you see, some that are running javelins like these kill shot, and then you have, I think, your first surge here, which also makes this tricky. It also starts spawning you in other places on the map as you start the level. So this one is definitely really hard. This took me multiple tries to get through just to realize the positioning and where the waves would be. So this one is a lot harder, and you can definitely feel like they've ramped stuff up. All right, guys, and that is as far as I got. As I said, I didn't do level 8 just because it costs 8 coins, and I wasn't about to spend 8 coins on this. So I did want to talk generally, though, about, like, this whole thing and how the whole experience goes. And things that I did like or don't like about it. So let's talk about the good. The formatting on this overall feels kind of cool. I don't think it's really bad or, like, super good. I like how, you know, you can see each of the levels, so you kind of have an idea of the progression. You understand the timing. You also have this onslaught shop in case you want to buy stuff if you're someone who does spend. I do feel like they've made the access of everything, you know, pretty straightforward. And you can see the building blocks here. Overall, the rewards on this are just kind of okay, but I do like the idea of how they could do some of the rewards here, potentially. So on this first level, you get this. You get the Pulse Cannon 4 for free, which is nice. Now, if you think about it, if you're a free-to-play player in this, you're already on Tier 3 because you have Ares to be able to begin this. So that means getting a Tier 2 weapon doesn't do a whole lot to progress you forward, but it does help round out your hanger. And I like the idea of if you're on this certain tier working on PvE, you can get items for free that would have been 8 coin based on previous tiers to help you just round out your hanger, but not really forward your progression specifically. I like how they have the potential to do that, and I'd love to see them do more of that on getting some of these other 8 coin based items that you wouldn't normally buy, but you can get for free when you do this. The other thing I liked about this was when we got to this option, you can see that you can choose now between the Jab 6 and the Cryo 6. Why is this a big deal? Well, because it means that they have the potential to give you choices for these. It isn't just like, here's one mech, here's one weapon, and you're done. They've already set up the idea of choosing different items. So I do hope that they push forward with this where, you know, it isn't all 8 coin based items. Like for this, obviously we only have the 8 coin based item, but they could have chose something different for this. That was a 6 energy weapon that is a credit based one that you'd be able to get instead of being an 8 coin based one. I'd love to see them do more of this because they have that potential, maybe even the potential of using a different mech, because I can absolutely see where this event could be tied or tailored to the new item, right? The new mech or the new weapon, and you have to use a lot of that, yada, 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 which obviously they want to get their profits. But if they made it difficult, but still allowed you to possibly complete it with lesser items that you can get in the Gear Hub for free, that means that at least it feels challenging and you can still get some of the rewards and the benefit out of this, even if you don't have the bought items. All right. So I think there's potential there, and I just hope they use it. I also think the idea of timing this event makes a lot of sense. Now, when I first started, I didn't love the idea of this, but as I talked more with like Ruffles and other people about it, the idea of having a timed event makes sense, because if you have PvE just available forever, you know, you can't always cycle in new stuff. You want it to be based around events. Plus, if you have it in all the time, it continually takes away from matchmaking. So you want to have it where it, you know, has its day, has its specialization like an event, and then you take it away so it doesn't take away from all this other stuff. And then matchmaking can relax a little bit. But those are kind of like the general good things that I liked about this. I also think they have all the building blocks here for like the core, and then adding in the other things that they've talked about previously, like more puzzle-based items, more like co-op or boss mode type stuff would be really, really nice. I'd love to see more of that. All right, now let's talk about some of the things that are unfortunate or not so good in this mode. First of all, as everybody has said, this seems very much based on the new player. Yeah, I understand, and I generally agree, which I would say is a bad thing, except right now it's A/B testing and it's only for new accounts. So it makes sense that it's centered around new players at the moment, but if it comes out like this, yeah, that's kind of bad for the general player base. It only focuses on new players, which I don't like. So I hope they have different steps and ways that other players can engage in this, maybe different tiers of the whole system. I'm not totally sure, but if it's going to be super focused on like new players, that really takes away from most of the other player base, so I don't like that aspect of it. This definitely has, you know, potential, like I said before, but right now as being only solo and nothing really special about it, like there's no lore, there's no co-op, there's no boss mode, there's nothing, you know, super special about it yet. It does still lack in that kind of area. And then, you know, there's just like a lack of the potential for like getting the rewards. So as we look at this, clearly it's putting all the rewards at the end, I can understand that with the skin and the cosmetic element of it. So like if you, similar to like buying cosmetics, you'd want it to have the highest price tag attached. But when it comes to the A-coin based stuff, this should be spread around so that people can kind of use it to get the stuff they need or soften the blow of getting the last item if you're going to do it. I don't think it should all be put at the end here, because if somebody can't complete the event, at least they can walk away with something or a little bit of something. Because right now, you know, you don't really have any other A-coins based in all these other things. The rewards are okay. It's nice to get them, but there's nothing really all that special about it. The only item that I really liked as a new player was getting this Pulse Cannon 4, which I talked about before. But again, you know, even though I'm talking about this bad stuff, you also have to remember this is in A/B testing. All right, this is super early. I don't know if you'd even call it phase 1, more like phase 0, because we don't know how this is actually going to work in the real game. So it's very hard for me to tell like where this could go and what they actually plan to do with it based on this super early stages. At the very least, I think, again, like I said before, it's still a bit of a mixed bag. I do think that there's better, you know, potential for how they spread out the resources, the lore, and all the other ways that they can amp this up. But I do think that there's, you know, really cool stuff attached to it. I do hope that this, you know, a couple things I want to say. I do hope. One, I do hope that this isn't going to be just tailored to the new items. Like I said before, I don't want this to be an event that's just going to be like, hey, the new mech is out and you have to use it for all of PvE. That just seems like a complete waste to me. That's terrible, and then it excludes way too many people from, you know, being able to play this. Number two, I hope that, especially for this event, that it is offered again so that people have the chance to get this Airy skin. It was cool to play with, and I think the unique skin is really special. So I really, really hope that they make sure that, you know, this one becomes available in some other way in future events that they do for this. But that's my overall thoughts of this whole system, you guys. Like I said before, it's still a mixed bag for me because it's really hard for me to tell where it's going to be going in the future. I don't have the highest of hopes just because I know how some events have gone in the past. So it may actually come out, you know, similar to the way it is, and we'll feel a little ho-hum about it. But, you know, at the very least, I want to suspend saying like good, bad, straight up, because it's hard for me to tell yet. If it came out in the current way, it is, you know, below my expectations. I'll say that. So hopefully there are things that they can take for what I've said that they could change, or other thoughts that you guys have. If you do have some other thoughts or suggestions that you think could work really well for PvE, feel free to leave them below, and we will see you out there on the battlefield.